Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the notifications bell. Happy Victory Day to everyone who had ancestors who fought in the Second World War, most especially our friends in Russia who are celebrating. This is a very important patriotic holiday. So we're going to have a very important stream. We got a friend who's joining us. We're going to talk about World War II and a lot of important things. So let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, 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 everybody. So, yeah, it's going to be a great conversation tonight. We're going to talk about Victory Day. We're going to talk about World War II. The way we do things normally, we have our opening segment, and then from there, we do a roll call. We find out who's on the other side of the camera, and then we answer people's questions for the rest of the night. So, I'm going to start out our opening segment today by bringing in a friend of ours, a guest, a CPI member named Rainer Shea. Welcome, Rainer. How you doing?
Oh, I've been having such an interesting time engaging with the people involved in the Cal Poly Humboldt occupation.
Yeah, I was hoping to have Rainer come on, and Rainer is going to tell us about what's been going on because he's a college student. He just graduated, and on his campus there has been a pro-Palestine encampment that's been set up. It's faced heavy government repression, etc. So I guess tell us about the campus and tell us what's been happening.
Well, on April 22nd, I was just having a regular day getting ready for the finals, and I met this friend of mine who's a student and also within the movement, and he told me about this thing as apparently happening at Siemens Hall. I had no idea about it, and he said, "You should go in." What are you talking about? It turned out people were occupying Siemens Hall on the quad, the central area within campus. And for the next couple hours, I witnessed an incredible series of escalations. At first, there was barely anything going on. There was maybe a few cops there. Then they sent in the riot police from Arcata Police Department, and it got violent. All of a sudden, one of the people, I'm pretty sure it was somebody within the staff, somebody with authority, was saying, "We need a fucking medic." So it got that serious. They used an excessive approach and a really disgusting display of where the leadership of this college is at. I mean, this college is kind of infamous for the way that it's treated its students. Last year, they kicked out a bunch of people from the dorms as a consequence of their expansion project so that they could gain more profits. It's quite a corporate situation. And now they've sent in the APD in quite an excessive way. And right now the situation it's been described by some of my student friends as effectively being martial law. The campus is closed off to anybody without authorization. The police are flexing their power. They've sent out a weird email to the students who are living on the dorms saying, "You can't walk across campus." So kind of creepy control, authoritarian stuff like that. But throughout the first week of the occupation, or like the first 4 days, it was legal to come onto campus just to be an observer. And I took up your advice, Caleb, to go to these places and seek out people who are compatible with what we are trying to do. start conversations with them, get their number. And that's what I did with at least a couple of people.
Great. And so I guess what is the perspective that you're hearing, and what have the more advanced forces you've talked to, how have they reacted to you? Let us know what's happening.
Well, there is now. This is one way that a conversation started. See, in the December CPI conference in Oregon, I bought a DPRK flag. I put this flag on my backpack. So now I'm going around all the time with this flag. Most of the time, people don't take notice, but sometimes, like in protest situations, they do. And that was part of how I met this one person, this dude who, well, I'm not going to say anybody's names, but
Sure.
I'm going to say the stories they told. He said that the way he got into communism was he started researching World War One, then he went down a rabbit hole of researching the Soviet Union, and as of then, that was pretty much the extent of his knowledge on communism. Didn't know too much about China or the DPRK. So I told him a bit about the DPRK's history, why I support the DPRK. And that's actually pretty relevant to Palestine because the DPRK has sent a lot of aid to the Palestinian armed resistance.
Mm, very neat. Great. Well, I hope that you've stayed in touch with this guy, and you will be continuing to be in touch with him. Have you had any other interesting conversations with the students?
Well, there was another dude, super passionate, and he knew more about China. Um, his passion was really infectious, and he clearly aligns with us in on a lot of respects, and so that's pretty much the extent of my story with him. I just enjoyed talking with him.
Great. Well, keep in touch with these people, and maybe we'll have a CPI event at some point in the future, and we can invite them, and they can get to know the whole organization. Or maybe you want to start something with the new textbook at some point, locally, get together and talk about different parts of it. Well, it sounds like you're doing great work. I guess I'm curious, are they expelling or suspending the students that are protesting at your school?
Yeah, from what I understand, a lot of people have gotten in trouble in that way. A lot of people have been charged. Dozens of people have been arrested. They're not
Wow.
all of them students. Plenty of people have come from off campus to aid in that effort. And within a week after the occupation started, when the police had had time to prepare and call in backup from the city of Chico, almost on the other end of the state, yeah, they went in with a new operation, and they broke through the barrier that these protesters had created fairly easily, it seemed. I mean, it didn't take too long for them to overwhelm the protesters.
Okay. Now, are there some of the regular Marxist tendencies? Are they visible in the protests?
Well, there's the Students for a Democratic Society, which, from what I saw, took on sort of a leadership role in terms
Mhm.
of organizing meetings among the people on the quad.
Okay, and that's
Uh,
basically Freedom
Even
Road
people.
Socialist Organization, right? They control it, right?
I I don't know. I haven't heard that.
Okay, okay. And what else?
Well, here's the interesting thing about PSL's role in this. It hasn't had a role at
Oh,
all. You'd think
interesting.
PSL would be super excited to insert itself into this event and promote itself. Like you said, lots of these groups do, and PSL has been doing that in other cases. But no, PSL has not been on top of it.
Hmm.
Maybe that's symptomatic of there being in a waning state within this area. I only saw one guy from PSL, and as far as I know, he wasn't even acting on behalf of PSL, just showing up to volunteer. So that's kind of a good sign. Um, but the thing about Answer and its front group PSL, which for those who don't know, is sort of the anti-war focused wing of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. The thing about Answer is the reason why we are opposed to it is because it tails leftism, because it doesn't try to adequately intervene within these spontaneous elements that carry out more underdeveloped, cruder forms of revolt. It just sort of goes along with it and promotes itself.
Yeah.
That's our problem with most leftist organizations.
Yeah. Well, very interesting. Well, thank you for giving us this report, Rainer. Is there anything you'd like to add about what you've observed on the campuses? Or I know your website is called News with Theory, and you write a lot of great articles on there. A lot of people really appreciate your writing. It's newswiththeory.com.
Yes.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share before you go?
Well, I also have Substack, Rainer Shea on Substack, and the latest thing I've written, it's about how we can expand the pro-Palestine movement, expand the energy from these protests into the broader masses. Most of the people in any given country are not going to be involved in activism, in the movement. And so we need to rectify this situation by reaching out into the more general population, appealing to their economic interests, relating to them. That's what I'm seeking to convey to people involved in the pro-Palestine movement.
Great. I think that's a great message. So keep up the good work, and I'm sure you'll be back to give us more updates. We'll be in touch. So thank you very much, Rainer, for coming on. And my best to you, your family, and everyone out in California.
You're welcome, and thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, that was a great report from Rainer. We always like to see what Rainer is doing. He's got some great articles on the website that he's written about the Palestine development and how, look, the cause is just. We do support these students and what they're doing. However, we do ultimately want to adopt more of a mass line and bring in the bulk of the American working class that wants an end to the wars, link it with the economic demands for jobs and healthcare and education. And why is our government funding Israel and its crimes against the Palestinians when our own country is in ruin and is falling apart? Right? That's the way we want to frame it. And but it's good to intervene. It sounds like he made really two really good contacts. But anyway, we are here to talk about Victory Day, because today is the anniversary of when the Soviet Union really led the world in smashing the Nazis. And when the Soviet Union took Berlin and when the Nazis were ultimately defeated, the victory was declared, and that was Victory Day. And the Soviet Union had been at the forefront of global anti-fascist struggles, from the Seventh World Congress of Georgy Dimitrov, building the Popular Front, or the United Front Against Fascism, all the way up to the partisan brigades and resistance fighting organizations that emerged during the Second World War behind enemy lines, run by communists and communist resistance, all the way up to the end of the war. China, you had Japan being fought by the communists. On the Korean Peninsula, you had Kim Il-sung heroically fighting the Japanese. The Soviet Union moving its forces into the Korean Peninsula in the final years of the war. A lot was happening. So I actually wanted to kind of set the tone for our conversation about Victory Day by showing a film that was created, a very short film that was created during the war, that was a speech from the Vice President of the United States. Henry Wallace was the Vice President for most of the Second World War. And Henry Wallace, as you know, he was eventually dropped from being vice president. He ran against Harry Truman in the 1948 election on a platform of continuing peace with the Soviet Union and supporting organized labor. And to support the war effort, the former Secretary of Agriculture, who became vice president to Franklin Roosevelt, Henry Wallace, gave this very, very populist, anti-fascist speech called The Century for the Common Man, that was made into a film, a short film, to support the global war effort against fascism. So we're going to show that film right now. This is a very important historical piece. This is The Century for the Common Man, the anti-fascist film by the Vice President.
We who in a formal or an informal way represent most of the free peoples of the world are met here tonight in the interests of the millions in all the nations who have freedom in their souls, to let those millions in the other countries know that here in the United States are 130 million men, women, and children who are in this war to the finish. Our American people, until they can strike the relentless blows that will assure a complete victory, and with it win a new day for the lovers of freedom everywhere on this earth. This is a fight between a slave world and a free world. Just as the United States in 1862 could not remain half slave and half free, so in 1942 the world must make its decision for a complete victory one way or the other. Down the years, the people of the United States have moved steadily forward in the practice of democracy. When the freedom-loving people march, when the farmers have an opportunity to buy land at reasonable prices and to sell the produce of their land through their own organizations, when the workers have the opportunity to form unions and bargain through them collectively, and when the children of all the people have an opportunity to attend schools which teach them the truths of the real world in which they live, when these opportunities are open to everyone, then the world moves straight ahead. But through the leaders of the Nazi Revolution, Satan now is trying to lead the common man of the world back into slavery and darkness. For the stark truth is that the violence preached by the Nazis is the devil's own religion of darkness. So also is the doctrine that one race or one class is by heredity superior, and that all other races or classes are supposed to be slaves. The March of Freedom of the past 150 years has been a long, drawn-out people's revolution. This great revolution of the people, there were the American Revolution of 1775, the French Revolution of 1792, the Latin American revolutions of the Bolivarian era, the German Revolution of 1848, the Russian Revolution of 1918. Each spoke for the common man in terms of blood on the battlefield. Some went to excess, but the significant thing is that the people groped their way to the light. The people are on the march toward even fuller freedom than the most fortunate peoples of the earth have hitherto enjoyed. No Nazi counter-revolution will stop it. The common man will smoke the Hitler stooges out into the open in the United States, in Latin America, and in India. He will destroy their influence. No Lavals, no Mussolinis will be tolerated in a free world. The people, in their millennial and revolutionary march toward manifesting here on earth the dignity that is in every human soul, hold as their credo the four freedoms enunciated by President Roosevelt. We who live in the United States may think there is nothing very revolutionary about freedom of religion, freedom of expression, and freedom from the fear of secret police. But when we begin to think about the significance of freedom from want for the average man, then we know that the revolution of the past 150 years has not been completed, either here in the United States or in any other nation in the world. We know that this revolution cannot stop until freedom from want has been attained. And now, as we go forward toward realizing the four freedoms of this people's revolution, I would like to talk about four duties. It is my belief that every freedom, every right, every privilege has its price, its corresponding duty, without which it cannot be enjoyed. The four duties of the People's Revolution, as I see them today, are these. The duty to produce to the limit. The duty to transport as rapidly as possible to the field of battle. The duty to fight with all that is in us. The duty to build a peace, just, charitable, and enduring. The fourth duty is that which inspires the other three. We failed in our job after World War I, but by our very errors we learned much. And after this war, we shall be in position to utilize our knowledge in building a world which is economically, politically, and I hope spiritually sound. There must be neither military nor economic imperialism. Some have spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering, the century which will come out of this war, can be and must be the century of the common man. If we really believe we are fighting for a people's peace, all the rest becomes easy. Production, yes. It'll be easy to get production without either strikes or sabotage. Production with a wholehearted cooperation between willing arms and keen brains. Enthusiasm, zip, energy, geared to the tempo of keeping at it everlastingly day after day. Hitler knows as well as those of us who sit in on the War Production Board meetings that we here in the United States are winning the battle of production. He knows that both labor and business in the United States are doing a most remarkable job. I need say little about the duty to fight. Some people declare, and Hitler believes, that the American people have grown soft in the last generation. Hitler agents continually preach that we are cowards, unable to use, like the brave German soldiers, the weapons of modern war. It is true that American youth hates war with a holy hatred. But because of that fact, and because Hitler and the German people stand as the very symbol of war, we shall fight with a tireless enthusiasm until war and the possibility of war have been removed from this planet. We shall cleanse the plague spot of Europe, which is Hitler's Germany, and with it the hellhole of Asia, Japan. The American people have always had guts, and always will have. You know the story of bomber pilot Dixon, and radio man Gene Aldrich, and ordnance man Tony Pastula. The story which Americans will be telling their children for generations to illustrate man's ability to master any fate. These men lived for 34 days on the open sea in a rubber life raft 8 feet by 4 feet, with no food but that which they took from the sea and the air, with one pocket knife and a pistol. And yet they lived it through and came at last to the beach of an island they did not know. In spite of their suffering and weakness, they stood like men, with no weapon left to protect themselves, and no shoes on their feet, and walked in military file, because they said, if there were Japs, we didn't want to be crawling. The American fighting men, and all the fighting men of the United Nations, will need to summon all their courage during the next few months. I am convinced that the year 1942 will be a time of supreme crisis for all of us. Hitler, like the prize fighter, who realizes he is on the verge of being knocked out, is gathering all his remaining forces for one last desperate blow. The convulsive efforts of the dying madman will be so great that some of us may be deceived into thinking that the situation is bad at a time when it is really getting better. But in the case of most of us, the events of the next few months, disturbing though they may be, will only increase our will to bring about complete victory in this war of liberation. Spiritually prepared, we cannot be surprised. Psychological terrorism will fall flat. As we nerve ourselves for the supreme effort in this hemisphere, we must not forget the sublime heroism of the oppressed in Europe and Asia. There can be no half measures. No compromise with Satan is possible. We shall not rest until all the victims under the Nazi yoke are freed. We shall fight for a complete peace as well as a complete victory. The people's revolution is on the march, and the devil and all his angels cannot prevail against it. They cannot prevail, for on the side of the people is the Lord. He giveth power to the faint. To them that have no might he increaseth strength. They that wait upon the Lord shall mount up with wings as eagles.
There you go. That was Vice President Henry Wallace, and that was his Century for the Common Man speech, honoring the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, honoring the struggle for freedom from want, and saying that labor unions and opposing all racial discrimination should be the lesson of the war. That was the Vice President of the United States, a friend of the Soviet Union, an admirer of Stalin. And that's why so much heroic activity was able to be done on the part of our people in the United States during that war, because in these years we had a strong Communist Party, we had a strong labor movement. The People's Revolution is on the march. Shout out to my friend Mike out in Miami. And it was a different time. And after the Second World War, he was forced out of the vice presidency. Truman, became president after the death of Roosevelt, and the anti-communism and the McCarthyism escalated. But there was something very optimistic about that period of the Popular Front, when there was a strong labor movement, when there was a strong Communist Party in the United States. And we should be proud of that history. Now, in honor of Victory Day, I do have a couple other clips I do want to show. One of them is an RT reporter, one of my colleagues, went and visited some World War II veterans who are still living, who are in the Donbass, in the region of Russia that just joined with Russia, that broke with Ukraine, the region that had been bombed, etc. So these are some World War II veterans in Donbass, in the new republics. So I wanted to put that on the screen. I wanted to show this clip. This is a very recent piece.
Dear veterans, on behalf of the servicemen of the Russian army, we warmly congratulate you on the great Victory Day. We will not allow the enemy to trample our land. The enemy will be defeated. Victory will be ours.
Some 27 million people across the Soviet Union gave their lives in the fight against Nazi Germany. Donetsk itself was occupied by the Nazis for almost 2 years, finally being driven out of the city in September 1943. But it's important to preserve that memory. Here we have soldiers who are currently serving in the special military operation, who are making their way now to the eternal flame here in the city of Donetsk to pay their respects and remember those who gave their lives for the freedom of so many people.
Lately, it's not only important for our generation. I have children, grandchildren, and every year I come to this memorial and treat it with responsibility. Every child should know the heroic feat, not only mine, but also of my grandfathers and the ancestors. I'm proud to be the grandson of a great hero of the Great Patriotic War.
So just here behind me, you can see this impressive statue which shows a worker and a soldier, the people that defended the city of Donetsk and those who rebuilt it. And just here, you can see just some of the thousands upon thousands of names of the people that were killed here in the battle, in what they call the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War. And they lost their lives here in Donetsk. And people have come here now to pay their respects.
Everyone should remember the feats of the heroes and not forget about their grandfathers who gave their lives for this victory. It is important to remember, and it is important to come, not to forget, to lay flowers. Otherwise, the younger generation will look at us and will forget if we do not come, and we will forget the heroes altogether. We must remember, we must come. The next generations will grow up and they will follow us.
There are just 68 veterans of the Great Patriotic War left here in the Donetsk People's Republic. That's why for them it is so important not just to remember, but to learn the lessons of history. 97-year-old Nikolai Ivanovich lives here in the Kurovsky district of Donetsk. It is an area where he finds himself on the front line once more, as it comes under constant Ukrainian shelling.
So it's time to get this thing over with. Out of the whole street now, we've got 2 destroyed houses. Children were maimed. A girl came to visit here, a little girl from Crimea. Her spine was broken. And this old lady who worked with me in the mines all her life. Women used to work there in the 50s, 60s, 70s. She was maimed, her house was wrecked. She rebuilt that house, repaired it, and now everything is in ruins again, just a heap of boards left. How can you sit by and watch this happen?
Vasily Zaharovich explained how those he fought alongside as comrades in World War II are now on the wrong side of history, stoking war with Russia. And he had a message for the western backers of Ukraine.
In 1944, they opened their second front. We were united, we were friends then. Our troops and their troops met at the Elbe. There was friendship. We were friendly all the time. America helped us during that time of war, and everything was fine. We pray that things get better soon. But now the world is at odds. We need to see more justice.
As Donetsk gears up for Victory Day, the links to the past are clear. This is why so many people here support Russia's special military operation, vowing never to allow fascism to gain a foothold in the region again. This is Steve Sweeney for RT in the Donetsk Republic.
Yeah. I mean, the history of the Second World War that is being commemorated today in very important gatherings, parades, etc., is very well alive because there are people fighting against the Russian state and the Donetsk People's Republic who are admirers of Stepan Bandera, the individual who tried to fight and defeat the Soviet Union back in those times and collaborated with Hitler and helped round up Jews for the concentration camps. And now there are open admirers of the fascists being backed by the United States in their effort to defeat Russia and to weaken Russia. And they're prolonging this war. 60 billion of our tax dollars were just sent to continue this ugly war. And yet the people continue to resist, and they're proud of their history. They're proud of the Soviet Union and what it achieved, the global anti-fascist movement that the Soviet Union led. So I wanted to show that. I also wanted to show a couple clips from the inauguration of Russian President Putin, because he was elected in March. He won the elections. But then, as you're aware, they just had his inauguration. And at his inauguration, there were a couple key remarks that he made that are worth highlighting. So I'm going to show a couple clips from President Putin's inauguration speech, because this is quite a moment. I mean, his country is in an all-out war for its survival. There's people dying on the front lines. And so here's the first clip from Putin's inauguration speech I wanted to show.
Must raise new generations that will strengthen the strength of the country. We must develop the multi-ethnic ties to preserve all the ethnicities living in Russia, to develop the civilization united by the Russian language and our multi-ethnic culture.
Now, that's really important, because if you read American media, you would think that Russian President Vladimir Putin that he's some kind of ethno-nationalist, that he's some kind of fighter only for Russians or people in the Russian Federation who look like him. And that's just bullshit. In fact, Russian President Vladimir Putin is wildly popular in the Islamic regions, wildly popular in Central Asia and in the Far East and Siberia. In fact, he's more popular in the regions where the people are ethnically less, quote unquote, European, whatever that means, than in the areas like Moscow and St. Petersburg. It tends to be in Moscow and St. Petersburg you find oppositionists, people who buy into the Western media, people who have resentments that's then stoked by social media. But it is Russians of different nationalities, Russians who practice Islam rather than Orthodox Christianity, Russians who have an Asian appearance. They tend to be even more supportive of the Russian president. And you wouldn't know that if you went there. You get the impression, especially because there's all this anti-Trump derangement syndrome, that Putin, the Russian president, is some kind of white nationalist or something. That's just malarkey. And in fact, one thing that the Russian president has recently been presiding over is the strengthening of Russia's relationship with Africa. The rise of Russia and Africa, their economic ties. Russia is sending a lot more fertilizer to Africa. A lot more grain is being exported to Africa. You have these new wave of West African countries that have kicked out the United Nations and brought in military folks that are aligned with Russia, and Russia expanding its presence on the African continent. The idea that Putin is some kind of ethno-nationalist or a supremacist of one race, I mean, that's just not true. In fact, Putin is very dedicated to strengthening the bonds of the different nationalities within the Russian Federation. And whenever I hear Russian political leaders speak, when I heard Sergei Lavrov many times, I've been at his press conferences at the United Nations, and I've heard him emphasize that they are trying to oppose the legacy of imperialism and colonialism. And I heard the Russian president say that at the World Youth Festival, opposing the legacy of imperialism and colonialism and upholding traditional values. And by traditional values, they mean the right of people to have jobs, the right of people to have health care, the right of people to be taken care of. The idea that human life should come before the profits of the wealthy few. And I will add that they are trying to increase the population in the world. The Western imperialist system is dominated by Malthusians who want to drive down the population of the world. But in Russia, they're trying to increase the population. And they're working with developing countries to increase their population because they know that human labor is the source of all wealth in the world. So more human beings means more wealth. They are not buying into this idea that there are limits to human growth, that human beings are the problem. Instead, they're trying to maximize human growth and potential. They're not into degrowth and trying to drive down living standards to save their system. So I want to show a couple other clips from the Russian president's inaugural speech. Here's another one.
We are open to strengthening good neighborly relations with all the countries that see Russia as a reliable and honest partner. And I'm speaking about the global majority. We do not refuse to engage in a dialogue with the Western countries. It is up to them to try to hinder the development of Russia, to go on with their policy of aggression, of the ongoing pressure on our country, or they will rather look for cooperation and peaceful relations with our country to discuss strategic stability and safety. This dialogue is possible, but not from the standpoint of arrogance and exclusivity, but only by respecting the interests of each other. And we will work with our partners, with other sovereign centers. We will continue to work to establish the multipolar world order, the equal and indivisible system of security. In the world that is rapidly changing, we must be self-sufficient and competitive. We must open new horizons for Russia, as it happened throughout our history on many occasions.
So there we go. There we go. He's talking about the fact that Russia wants to have a good relationship, even with the Western countries. But Russia very much sees itself as at the center of the new economy that is rising. And there's a whole new world centered around Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba, and they are very much part of that. But they want to get along with the Western countries too, but it has to be on the basis of respect. This idea that they don't have the right to develop, that they have to stay in poverty, they don't have the right to build up their own economy. That's bullshit. They have the right to exist as a country, and they have the right to build themselves up. I'll show one more clip from Putin's speech.
We are united in great people, and together we will overcome any obstacles. We will implement everything that we have planned. Together we will win.
Now that slogan, "Together we will win," that has been Russian President Putin's campaign slogan in the past. And I think Medvedev has used that slogan as well. What's interesting is that was also the slogan of the Great General Strike of Seattle in 1919. I don't think that there's any relationship there, but in 1919, the workers of Seattle went on strike, led by the great writer Anna Louise Strong, who's one of my favorite writers. And the slogan that they used when they shut down the city of Seattle in 1919, the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, their slogan was, "Together we will win." And that is now a Russian government slogan. Together we will win. And, since the beginning of the special military operation, there has been a wave of Soviet nostalgia. Stalin is wildly popular in Russia at this time because he's remembered as a leader who helped, defeat the Nazis and built the country up and industrialized it and wiped out illiteracy and wiped out poverty, and made a modern electrified country, built a modern steel industry. Stalin is remembered as a great leader of the country. You saw the hammers and sickles, and people are marching into battle with their Orthodox icon, their Orthodox flag of Jesus, as well as their hammers and sickles, defending their homeland, defending traditional values. That's what they call it, traditional values, the right of people and human life before profit, opposing the legacy of imperialism and colonialism, establishing deeper bonds and ties with Africa. Russia is really on the front lines of the battle going on in the world today against imperialism. And all the communist governments of the world support Russia. Cuba supports Russia. In Ukraine, they just built a big statue of Fidel Castro in Moscow. Nicaragua supports Russia. Venezuela supports Russia. Vietnam supports Russia. China supports Russia. North Korea supports Russia. There's actually a lot of noise being made by Washington about North Korea's increased military relationship with Russia and alleged ties between the Russian military and the North Korean military. Belarus supports Russia, and that the global communist movement, where communists are actually in power, where they lead mass organizations, the global communist movement is aligned with Russia. There are a lot of Western leftists who think they know communism better, and they are not aligned with Russia. But they're also not aligned with any existing communist governments. They're doing some kind of intellectual exercise, but it has nothing to do with what the countries around the world that are actually building socialism in our time are doing. The countries around the world that are actually building socialism in our time, that have Marxist-Leninist parties in power, that preside over socialist planned economies, they are solidly behind Russia, as they see Russia as a big factor in the new economy that is emerging in the world, breaking out of what Lenin called imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Capitalism in its monopolistic stage. Anti-imperialism is what it's all about, folks. We just put out our new textbook at the Center for Political Innovation. It's a big one, too. It's a big book on the history of communist movements and anti-imperialist movements in America. Out of the movement to the masses, anti-imperialist organizing in America. And it's all about the history of the Communist Party, the history of the Workers' World Party and the Sam Marcy tendency, the history of the new communist movement and the Maoist elements during the 1970s, divisions in the ruling class, and right up to today and the work of the Center for Political Innovation. A lot of original texts from the time period. On the cover, we have the famous photo of veterans marching, "We won't fight another rich man's war." Now is the time to build an anti-imperialist movement in the United States, to really love America, to really love the working people of this country, to be a true patriot, means that you want to break this country out of imperialism and build a new society where the needs of the people come before the profits of a wealthy few. And we have an economy that's centered around serving people's needs right here, not a global financial system that's about keeping the world poor and making it poorer to preserve the profits of a small group of billionaire monopolists based in the Western countries. In addition to that, if you're genuinely a Christian, as most people in the United States put that forward as their religious beliefs, right? There's no way that any follower of Christ could put forward and advocate for a system where profits come before people. There's no way that anyone who truly believes in Christian principles could be an advocate of this system that pushes war and destruction around the world. So we see ourselves as the inheritor of everything good in America's history, from the abolitionist movement and the struggle to defeat slavery, from the American Revolution and the desire to have economic development and not just be a trading hub in the British Empire and their thalassocracy, their empire of the sea. From the struggle to build labor unions, the struggle of women to get the right to vote. We see ourselves as the inheritors of the progressive traditions of the American people. And we put forward a new kind of patriotism. We don't celebrate ugly wars of conquest in places like Iraq or Vietnam. We celebrate wars of liberation to liberate the concentration camps of Europe and defeat the fascists. We celebrate the war to liberate the slaves of the South, the American Revolution, and the Second American Revolution, led by Abraham Lincoln, where Harriet Tubman became the first woman to lead soldiers into battle in American history. She became a military leader as she led slaves in South Carolina to liberate plantations. We see ourselves from the tradition of John Brown and Frederick Douglass, from the tradition of Gus Hall and Huey Newton and the Black Panthers and Fred Hampton. We see ourselves from the tradition of William Z. Foster. We see ourselves in the tradition of the Wobblies, the tradition of so many great people, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. We are from the great tradition of Americans who struggled against war and empire, Americans like Eugene Debs. That is who we are. And we don't hate the American people, and we don't hate America. We recognize that amid all the bad things in the history of this country, there's always been people fighting back and resisting. There's always been people opposing these bloody wars. There's always been people standing up against racism, standing up against slavery, standing up against the oppression of working people on the assembly line and the factories. There's always been a progressive side to the American people, and that is who we are. And if socialism is ever going to come to this country, it will be the awakening of the progressive side of the American people and its opposition to war and empire and its desire to build a whole new world for the American people. That will be what ultimately comes out of the movement here. And it is our duty not to just express moral indignation and try to declare that we are in opposition to the society around us. It's our duty to insert ourselves into the society around us and make clear that we represent all that is best about the American people and the American tradition, and that one day the good America, the America of the workers and the farmers, will take power. The real America will assert itself, and we represent that real America against the bosses and billionaires who are destroying this country economically in order to enrich themselves and sending Americans to die for their profits around the world. We are the true patriots, and that's why we honor Victory Day and we celebrate the alliance with the Soviet Union, the alliance with China, the alliance with the anti-fascist resistance forces that fought in Italy, that fought in Germany and France, Resistance, right? That's us. We are the anti-fascists. We are the anti-imperialists, the anti-racists, the labor organizers. That's us. That's our heritage. That is who produced the Communist Party. That is who produced the new communist movement of the 1970s. And that is who has produced the Center for Political Innovation. We are proud of our heritage, and we march ahead and we look forward to building a progressive movement. I always think about the song Marching Through Georgia, which is a song about the Civil War. And there's a verse in the song Marching Through Georgia. There were many Union men who wept with joyful tears when they saw the honored flag they had not seen for years. Hardly could they be restrained from breaking forth in tears as they went marching through Georgia, and how the American flag was seen as a flag of liberation as it marched through Georgia, defeating the slaveholders, liberating slaves from their condition, liberating low-income white workers from the oppressive Confederacy that sacrificed their lives in order to preserve their ability to exploit people. The Second American Revolution of John Brown and Harriet Tubman and Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, that is the legacy that we march behind. And we are very proud of that. And we know that America loves Russia, that Russia came to the aid of the American Revolution. Russia came to the aid of Abraham Lincoln and sent their fleet to New York City's harbor to deter the British from joining the war. That Russia was the main force that just overwhelmed and smashed the Nazis during World War II. And that is the Russia that we love. And that Russia is now fighting for its life on the battlefields of Donetsk and Lugansk. And we support Russia in their fight against fascism and against NATO. And we think that the criminal regime in Washington, D.C. does not represent the American people. The American people repudiate and reject Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and their sinister plans for World War III and a low-wage police state. We don't want your wars. We don't want your police state. We don't want your lockdowns. We don't want your poverty. We don't want what you're selling. We want an America for the workers and the farmers and the impoverished people of this country. We want an America that believes in economic development and growth. We want an America that offers a hand of friendship to Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela and Cuba and the Palestinians. We want an America that rejects Zionism and the crimes of the Israeli regime. That's the America that we stand for, an America beyond the rule of prophets and bankers, an America with peace and jobs and democracy and equality. That is our America, and we will continue to bear that flame here on Victory Day. I think about my grandparents, both of whom, both sides. I had grandparents who fought in the Second World War. My grandfather on my father's side, he fought. He was in the U.S. Navy. He was in the Marine Corps first, and then he was transferred to the U.S. Navy. My grandmother on my father's side, she worked in an armaments factory making bullets throughout the war. She was in Missouri. My grandfather on my mother's side, he was in the U.S. Army Air Corps. There was no Air Force back then, but there was a U.S. Army Air Corps, and he fought in that. And my grandmother on my mother's side, she was in the Army Corps of Nurses. And when D-Day happened, she was in a hospital in London as they flew wounded men back to London to get emergency surgery, to be taken care of, as they were storming the beaches of Normandy. And I'm very proud of my grandparents and their role in the great anti-fascist war, and the fact that they were on the side of the Russians and on the side of the Chinese, on the side of all the progressive people in the world against fascism. I'm very proud of the role that they played. So I think I'm going to put on the song Marching Through Georgia before we do our roll call, and then I'll answer people's super chat questions. And it's probably going to be a short stream tonight because I am actually feeling quite tired. As you can probably tell from my voice, I'm feeling a little bit more tired than usual, and that's okay, right? I think it's really important to do a Victory Day stream to assert our kind of patriotism, the patriotism of the workers and the farmers, the patriotism that rejects war. I think that's a really good thing to talk about on Victory Day. So I'm going to put on the patriotic song from the Second American Revolution, from the Civil War, Marching Through Georgia. And after that, we'll do our roll call, and then I will answer people's super chat questions. Thank you all for being here. Happy Victory Day. All right, Marching Through Georgia. We're going to put the patriotic, song of the Second American Revolution, Marching Through Georgia. So here we go. Marching Through Georgia.
Ring the good old bugle, boys, we'll sing another song. Sing it with the spirit that we'll want to sing along. Sing it as we used to sing it, 50,000 strong, while we were marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we'll bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were marching through Georgia. How the darkies shouted when they heard the joyful sound, how the turkeys gobbled which your commissary found, how the sweet potatoes even started from the ground, while we were marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we'll bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were marching through Georgia. Yes, and there were Union men who wept with joyful tears when they saw the honored flag they had not seen for years. Hardly could they be restrained from breaking forth in cheers, while we were marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were marching through Georgia. Sherman's dashing Yankee boys will never reach the coast, so the saucy rebels said, and 'twas a handsome boast. Had they not forgotten for to reckon with their host, while we were marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were marching through Georgia. So we made a thoroughfare for freedom and for train, 60 miles in latitude, 300 to the main. Treason fled before us, for resistance was in vain, while we were marching through Georgia. Hurrah, hurrah, we'll bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sang the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were marching through Georgia.
I do apologize. Generally, people don't use the offensive word that was in that song. Usually people say, you know, how the people shouted. But I guess they used the original lyrics. So I do apologize for that. But I also figured since we just played Marching Through Georgia, the Wobblies, you know, the IWW, they rewrote the song to be about the struggle of workers on the job to form a working class government, and eventually to form one big industrial union, and eventually a working class government. So this is the Wobblies. They rewrote the lyrics. They wrote their own song called Paint Her Red. So I'll put that on as well. Why not, right? So this is the Wobblies rewrite of Marching Through Georgia.
Come with us, you working folk, and join the rebel band. Come, you discontented ones, and give a helping hand. We march against the parasite to drive him from the land with one big industrial union. Hurrah, hurrah, we're gonna paint her red. Hurrah, hurrah, the way is clear ahead. We're gaining shop democracy and liberty and bread with one big industrial union. In factory and field of mine, we gather in our might. We're on the job and know the way to win the hardest fight. For the beacon that shall guide us out of darkness into light is one big industrial union. Hurrah, hurrah, we're gonna paint her red. Hurrah, hurrah, the way is clear We're gaining shop democracy and liberty and bread with one big industrial union. Come on, you fellas, get in line. We'll fill the boss with fears. Red's the color of our flag. It's stained with blood and tears. We'll tout it in his ugly mug and ring our loudest cheers for one big industrial union. Hurrah, hurrah, we're gonna paint her red. Hurrah, hurrah, the way is clear ahead. We're gaining shop democracy and liberty and bread with one big industrial union. Slaves, they call us working plugs, inferior by birth. But when we hit their pocketbooks, we'll spoil their smiles or mirth. We'll stop their dirty dividends and drive them from the earth with one big industrial union. Hurrah, hurrah, we're gonna paint her red. Hurrah, hurrah, the way is clear ahead. We're gaining shop democracy and liberty and bread with one big industrial union. We hate their rotten system more than any mortals do. Our aim is not to patch it up, but build it all anew. And what we'll have for government when finally we're through is one big industrial union. Hurrah, hurrah, we're gonna paint her red. Hurrah, hurrah, the way is clear ahead. We're gaining shop democracy and liberty and bread with one big industrial union.
So there you go. All right, everybody. Names and locations, names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us here tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? We got Mark Jones in Utica, New York. We got Barry in Utah. We got the seasoned noob in China. We got Nate in Chicago. Nate is always here. Bob in Troy, New York. Eric in Lockhart, Texas. Patch in Arizona. My good friend Mike from Miami. It's been too long. So glad you're here, Mike. Shout out to Mike. I've known Mike for years. He's awesome. Great guy. Great comrade. Jenny in Cincinnati. Dionysus in Greece. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Frank Jagger in Floridman County. Finn in Duluth. Luca in Singapore. Ryan Clark in Kansas City. Chris and April in Salt Lake City. Crooklyn in Brooklyn. Alabama. AL from London, UK. Denver in Colorado. Meredith and Quinn in Eatonville, Washington. Very, very good. Sarah Jackman is in Oregon. Welcome, Sarah. Good to have you with us. Kieran is in London. Welcome, Kieran. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Jeff in Los Angeles. John McCarthy in Chicago. Jackie Boy from Sydney. Ian from Chester, England. Blake in Alabama. Patrick in Maine. Chad from Lake Oswego. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Buttercup Taylor in California. Welcome, Buttercup. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. We got Mosen from Denver, Colorado is with us. Names and locations. Greetings from the Russian city of, I don't even want to say it. I'll get it wrong. But, you know, glad to have Russian friends here, and happy Victory Day. Colin in Greensboro. Welcome, Colin. Belfast in Ireland. Welcome, Irish comrades. Belfast. Names and locations. QC from Los Angeles. Oh, Quebec to Los Angeles. Nico, welcome. Joe from Massachusetts. Welcome, Joe. Shout out to Buttercup. Very good. Briggy, Pennsylvania. Sorry about your dog, John. Oh, sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. Shannon from, unfortunately, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. London is London. It's not the UK. Totally different country. Okay. All right. Hi, Jenny, says Chalabinsk. I probably butchered that. My Russian speaking is not good. I don't really speak Russian, so there we go. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? All right. Well, folks, I have 5 super chats to answer. 5 super chats and no Rumble rants as of yet, though. Shout out to Rachel in Winder. She is on the Rumble watching. So shout out to Rachel. Saw that name come through. And if you have something you would like me to talk about here in the second half of the show, all you need to do is send a super chat on YouTube or a Rumble rant on the Rumble. You know, I am happy to answer your questions. Super chats, not only do they help give me something to talk about in the second half of the show and get me talking, they also support the work that I do. I live in New York City where the rent is too damn high. I maintain this 2-bedroom apartment, which is not cheap, so that I can have a room to work out of, a home studio. So if you want to support my ability to get on here every night and stream, which we are, I think it's 5 for 5. It's 5 nights in a row we've been doing this, right? And we do this as much as possible. We do it almost every night. So if you want to support my ability to get on here and talk to you every night, send me a super chat. That revenue does support this channel and my ability to do the work that I do. There are other ways to support me. You can buy the books that we publish, the books that I've written. You know, we got the Houthi book, you know, our new book on the Houthis, which made a big splash. Or you can support me on the Patreon. Now, if you donate to CPI, the Center for Political Innovation, or you are a member and pay dues, that does not support me. I have no access to those funds. There was some stupid innuendo from some very stupid people. So we've tried to make sure that there's no one claiming anything about that. I have no access to CPI funds proper. So if you're in CPI or you're donating to help CPI activities, that doesn't go to me. But if you do want to support me in my ability to maintain this extra bedroom, or yeah, it is a bedroom technically. I mean, I use it for a home studio. Then by all means, send super chats. Super chats or Rumble rants are one way to get me talking on here. I will say, I'm getting a lot of very positive feedback on our new textbook. I mean, this is like 600 pages long. I mean, officially it is what, it's 517 pages total. And it's huge. It is not small, and it's not huge print either. I mean, this is a huge textbook with a lot of original material. This is the kind of thing that if you bought it for a college class, it would probably cost you $200, maybe more than that. But it's only $34, $34.99 on Amazon. And it's a beautiful work. I must say that Elizabeth and Marissa, who laid it out, did an amazing job. This is really a masterpiece. You read this book, you will understand the anti-imperialist movement in America from the time of the Communist Party right up to today. I'm very proud of our new textbook, and we've already sold 82 copies of it, right? In the first 2 weeks it's been out, because people are anxious to hear our anti-imperialist perspective. So can you shout out my comrade Jennifer Iya in Miami? Well, I don't know anything about Jennifer, but I can shout her out. Jennifer Iya in Miami. 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 How's that? Is that good? All right. There you go. Anything for my buddy Mike. Mike and I go way back. I remember we were walking through the streets of Manhattan years ago when I lived in Cleveland and he was in Miami. And we were singing, and neither of us knew the lyrics. We were just singing the Russian, I think it was originally a Polish communist song. Neither of us knew the lyrics. We just knew the tune. Dun, 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 dun. So that was a lot of fun. Anyhow. All right. Freedom Flotilla has a 3-minute video about all the things that Israel bans Gaza from receiving. Well, why don't we show that video, right? Since support for the Palestinians and solidarity with their work is very, very important to what we're doing here. Why don't we show that video? I will start downloading that video. Since we do want to do everything we can to support the Palestinians. Very good. Very, very good. It says can't parse the link, which is very odd, right? For some reason, it does not like the link to that video. So let me try again. I'll try another way to download the video. It may be, did this go up recently, like in the last few hours? Sometimes I have trouble downloading videos that are recent, right? But for some reason, it doesn't want to let me download that video. I don't know why. Trying to Oh, okay. Well, here it's letting me download this version. So I think I've got a version of it I can download. Hold on. It seems to be, here we go. Here we go. All right. All right. I've got a version of it I can show. There we go. There we go. Okay. Hold on. Just trying to get the video downloaded. Just trying to get the video downloaded. Oh, here we go. It's going to let me save the video. This is very bizarre. I have, downloading videos is always a challenge. For some reason, the main program that I generally use doesn't want me to download it. So I'm trying to save. I have it on this other site, and it doesn't seem to be letting me download the video. I don't know why. Very odd. Here, let me quit some programs. Okay, download. Why does it not want to let me download this video? Save video as. This is very odd. This is very downright odd. Oh, wait. There it goes. There it goes. Okay. All right. Now it's downloading. I don't know why it didn't download at first, but now it's downloading. Okay. Very good. All right. I'm getting your video up, John. Sorry about that. YouTube downloaders be sketchy these days. Well, there you go. All right. Okay. Very good. All right. So let's put it on the screen. All right. Okay. Oh, it has no sound. It has no sound. That's just great. All right. Well, let's try to download it another way that it has some sound. This is a strange situation, but hey, it happens, right? Let's see if I can get it from this other site. For some reason, it downloaded without sound. Not cool. All righty. Downloading it from another site. Hold on. Yes, video downloaders are indeed sketchy. Now this other site is saying it cannot download it. This is very odd. I have generally not had this problem. It must be a very recent video, I'm thinking. Maybe I can play it tomorrow, John, but let me try one more, right? Let me try one more. Let me try a couple more because I should be able to show this. This is odd. Okay. Nope. It's just not it doesn't like this one for some reason, John. I don't know why. It just doesn't like it. It does not like this. So let's try it again tomorrow. It may be a fairly recent video. It just doesn't want me to download it. But I will throw this out there, right? So the night before our National Center for Political Innovation convention, we did have an event, a separate event with Jyoti Brar from the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, where she gave a speech about why Russia and China are not imperialist, which was a great speech. And then she, on top of that, talked about why we should support the Palestinians. So I wanted to put that on. This is just a clip from it. The whole video will be out soon. But this is just a clip. Thanks. Shout out to Peter, our community member, Peter. He videoed the whole thing. This is a clip from the bigger video that will be out eventually.
USSR, China, and the DPRK created strong militaries, not to be aggressive, but to defend their socialist gains and on the back of socialist planning and socialist technological advancement. They weren't trying to conquer anybody. They weren't pulling wealth from the rest of the world in order to build themselves up. They weren't projecting power. They were building defensive capabilities. And let's not forget that it's this basis that forms the basis of Russia's armed forces today. Why is it that the armed forces in Russia, just as in China and the DPRK, focus on developing cheap weapons that will be effective in defense? Supersonic, hypersonic missiles, small drones, air defense systems. Why have they built big, motivated armies that can defend their homelands? Find me one country in the world where Russian or Chinese military operate without an invitation. Can you say the same about the USA? No. Find me the demoralized, suicidal soldiers in their armies who don't know what they're fighting for and are appalled by the crimes that they've taken part in or witnessed. Find me the Russian and Chinese monopoly corporations that are taking over our lives and dictating to our governments. Show me the Russian and Chinese investments abroad that are bringing super profits to bribe the workers in those countries into accepting that their rulers pillage the world. On the contrary, the Russians have incensed the West by offering military protection and partnership to countries that have asked them for that partnership and assistance, helping them to keep imperialist domination at bay. And every time a country asks Russia for its help and Russia accepts, I cheer. It's brilliant. There's a little bit of breathing space being created for some countries in Latin America and in Africa from the endless suffering that they've had to endure. It's a wonderful advance, and it's disgusting that people who call themselves communists denounce it as imperialism. This is imperialist propaganda, pure and simple. They're gnashing their teeth. Good. Good. If it upsets them, good. You know, the Chinese equally have incensed the West by offering infrastructure and development help, making loans on easy terms, sharing technologies instead of controlling them. They're undercutting the imperialist technological dominance. And that's the key reason, actually, that China is targeted by the USA. On the one hand, you've got the Chinese who nearly 10 years ago now launched their Made in China 2025. What did that mean? It meant China is striving to become technologically independent by 2025. That's very close now. And on the other hand, you hear the Antony Blinkens of this world saying, we've only got till 2025 to destroy China, or it'll be too late. What are they talking about? That's exactly what they're talking about. They're talking about technological dominance. Because without technological dominance, imperialist financial dominance is very hard to maintain. Because what is it that backs up the economic might of the imperialists? When they come with smiles and contracts on the one hand, what's behind their back is a gun. What makes the guns of small countries scary to big countries? They're bigger, more powerful, unanswerable. They've got the most advanced military technology. If they lose that dominance, their day is done. If I may, I want to talk a little bit about Palestine. You know, it's the same people who want us to believe that the war in Ukraine is a dispute between rival imperialist groups and the workers don't have a side. They're busy peddling this myth around the left that Hamas and Israel are as bad as each other, that both sides are in some way being manipulated by the imperialists for their own ends.
Yeah, so that whole speech and the whole meeting, I mean, there were different speakers as well. That's going to be up on YouTube, you know, soon. So look forward to that. The whole event will be up there. And so, John, I hope that this video, I hope I'm able to get it for tomorrow, but it won't let me, it won't parse the link. I think it's because it's recent. It came out in the last 10 hours. It says it's only 10 hours old. It usually has to be 24 hours old before they'll let you rip it. So try it. Let's try that again tomorrow. There we go. Organized labor should support the people of Gaza. I would agree. Overwhelmingly, I would agree. And it's great to see the United Auto Workers kind of taking the lead. The UAW, which has a lot of Arab American workers in it, has a lot of black workers, and also has a member of the Center for Political Innovation, Tom Mitchlack, who represented us at the World Youth Festival. It has, taken a stand against what Biden is doing and backing Israel and doing in Gaza. So I think that is a really tremendous thing, and that labor unions opposing Israel, calling for divestment from Israel, it's a really important thing. Now, one thing that is fascinating, the fact that the UAW, I just want to mention, the fact that the UAW is taking this stand is a really big deal because the fight for the UAW to not be a pro-Israel union goes back 50, 60 years. The first people to oppose the United Auto Workers backing Israel were these guys. This is a great book, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, A Study in Urban Revolution. And it's about the history of the Dodge Revolutionary Union Movement, or DRUM. DRUM was established during the 1970s as a black and Marxist caucus of the United Auto Workers. And we also discuss it in the new textbook. There's a section on DRUM. And DRUM was pro-Palestinian. DRUM supported the Palestinian people. And they were accused of anti-Semitism. Their leaflets were banned from union halls, etc. But they were pro-Palestinian, and they got a lot of Arab workers. It was mainly an African-American organization. They got a lot of Arab workers to support them in taking that stand. There were walkouts and protests in the plants to oppose Israel. And so, the fact that the United Auto Workers has now come out strongly against Israel and condemned it, called for divestment. That is a really great step forward because the UAW leadership has been dominated by Zionists for quite some time, but not anymore. Not anymore. All right. And thank you, Rayner. Yeah, Rayner is a great guy. He's a CPI member. He's also involved in a number of other groups at his university out in California, different socialist groups. And we allow dual membership in the Center for Political Innovation. We're a socialist educational project. And if you want to help educate, you're welcome to come along. We're not a party. We're not a pre-party formation. We are a socialist education project. It's what we've always been. So Rayner is great. We love Rayner. And, Rayner has come a long way. His analysis has really gotten more on point over the years. He's a very skilled young writer. We love Rayner. All right. Thanks and praises to all communist comrades who died liberating the world from fascism. Solidarity forever and the blockade of Cuba. Free Palestine. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We're with you. We're with you, Mike. I couldn't agree with you more, and Cuba has been a friend of the Palestinian people. They understand their revolution to be part of the same global anti-colonial and anti-imperialist struggle that Israel, the fight against Israel by the Palestinians is based on. So there we go. Russia's victories in Ukraine are emboldening Africa to stand up against colonialism. Yes, and that is a point that John made very eloquently in his in a speech that he gave at the Uhuru movement at their gathering. And I might actually put that speech on. I think we played that before, but I think that might be a great thing to put on here tonight. John he represented the Center for Political Innovation at the Uhuru movement's national gathering to strategize their fight against the FBI repression. And he gave a speech in which he referenced how Russia and the Uhuru movement, by their resistance, have created political space. So I think I think it was that in the speech that you gave in Missouri, John. If so, I think I'll put that speech on. If it's the other speech that you gave, the one you gave in DC, I'll put that one on too, I guess. But yeah, this was John's speech that he gave at the national gathering of the Uhuru movement and their struggle against the FBI. We are the biggest supporters of the Uhuru movement and Chairman O'Malley against the FBI, right? And that's a litmus test, right? You don't have to agree with them. But they are, at this point, they are up against brutal FBI repression. They're trying to outlaw being an anti-imperialist in America, and we all need to come together and oppose it. And it was an honor to have Chairman O'Malley on this YouTube channel. And here we go.
Next up, we are going to bring John McCarthy here from Chicago to represent the Center for Political Innovation. Thank you, John. And Tim.
Hello, it's an honor to be here. This is the most important fight going on right now in this country. And imperialism is not doing this out of strength, they're doing it out of weakness. Their internal contradictions are destroying them. And about a year ago, the imperialists made two very big mistakes. And in both cases, they messed with the wrong group of people. They called themselves teaching Russia a lesson. And Russia is winning this war politically, economically, and militarily. And they wanted to make an example out of them. Well, they did. Russia set the example to governments and colonized people all over the world that the imperialists cannot back up their threats, that you can stand up to imperialism and survive, and you don't have to take orders from Washington anymore. And all around the world that's happening. Countries are banding together, they're not using the dollar anymore, and they're kicking the colonizers out. And similarly, they thought that they would teach you guys a lesson, right? And, they military assault, right? Economic warfare. You've survived economic warfare. Instead of cutting a deal, you fought back. And instead of disappearing like they wanted you to, you grew. Every single project that life-saving project that you were working on in the African neighborhoods of Florida and here in St. Louis is still continuing, right? And on top of that, you raised almost $300 in legal fees. Chairman's name is a household word now, right? So just like Russia has showed countries all over the world that they can stand up, you're showing people all over the United States that we can stand up. By fighting and winning, you're not just defending yourself, you're creating a space for all anti-imperialists in this country to continue to tell the truth and continue to show alternatives to this dying system. And we at the Center for Political Innovation are grateful to you for that. And we intend to make use of that space that you have won for us to continue to stand up against this system and stand up for what's right and to build an alternative to it. And thank you.
Yeah, that was a great speech from John. Thank you for representing us and giving a great presentation. Hey, if people have more super chats or questions, we got 2 good questions left. But if people have more and they want to ask me more questions, now would be the time, because my strength is fading fast. For some reason, I don't know what it is, fall allergies or what. My strength tonight is not what it has been before, but that's okay. So I am going to put on just a quick short video showing you some of CPI's activities. And then I'm going to answer the remaining questions. So if you have any questions, send them in now. So there we go. Alrighty. So now we've got a question here. How would you map the legacy of imperialism through history? What are the contours you'd use to draw back into, say, the time of the Romans? Well, we need to talk about what imperialism is, okay? Because the standard definition of imperialism is just expansionism, building an empire. And obviously that has gone on for thousands and thousands of years. Human societies have expanded. Human civilizations have expanded. There's the nation state, which became popular in Europe. And now we talk about how Russia and China are not nation states because they're multinational, but they are civilization states. Because they encompass a civilization with different nationalities in it. And I would argue the United States is also a civilization state. We're not a nation state. Our civilization states, empires. The thing is, the definition of imperialism that Marxists generally use and that I use is an economic one. It refers to a stage of the economic system of capitalism, right? So I don't consider the Roman Empire to be part of that definition because they weren't capitalist. They were a slave empire. So they're not part of the economic system, a stage of capitalist development that Lenin was referring to, right? The Roman Empire practiced slavery. And they were largely trying to block the rise of feudalism. Feudalism is much more efficient than slavery, and feudalism was starting to emerge during the time of the Roman Empire, and the Roman Empire was trying to hold it back. Rome was a slave military city-state, and that's an important thing to be aware of. The other thing is that, when you talk about empire, right, you talk about imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. Lenin is specifically referring to how Western countries, starting in like the late 1800s, began to engage in what he called the export of capital, meaning that they exported their corporations around the world to dominate the economies of developing countries, and that they held back development in these countries in order to dominate them. Now, I would argue that the modern economic system of imperialism flows from what has been a global or a widespread trend throughout history called thalassocracy, which is empire of the sea, right? So geopolitics talks about how there are two types of empires. There is turgocracy, which is an empire of the land, and there is thalassocracy, which is an empire of the sea. And that the empires of the land, the Russian Empire, the Chinese dynasties, the Persian Empire, that the empires of the land that existed in previous modes of production, largely during the era of slavery, maybe during the era of feudalism, the empires of the land had to engage in development because they had to build roads and infrastructure in order to trade with their neighbors. Whereas the empires of the sea did not, and they largely suppressed development and centralized economic power and kind of brought all the loot to one city-state. They were centered around a city, not even a country, but a city. And wealth was kind of stripped from the world. They kind of enforced dominance over sea trade routes and collected all the wealth into one particular city-state. And if you read, for example, Henry Charles Carey, who was an economist who was very opposed to slavery. He was the economist that Karl Marx called the only American economist of any worth, Henry Charles Carey. Henry Charles Carey wrote a pamphlet called The Harmony of Interests. And in that pamphlet, he talked about two systems of global trade, one being the English system and one being the American system. Now, when he describes the English system, he's describing something that's very similar to what developed later, what Lenin labeled later imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And he's describing basically a mode of economic exploitation where wealth is kept back, where countries are kept impoverished, and where all the wealth centralizes usually in the power of one great city. And that I think he says one model of British trade seeks to exploit the Hindu and sink the rest of humanity down to his level, right? And that if you read what Henry Charles Carey wrote about in the Harmony of Interests pamphlet that he wrote about the English system that was supporting slavery in the South, and what he calls the American system, which is an industrial economy following the economic theories of I'm sorry, I'm just short of breath. I'm a little bit, the allergies and everything. The American system following what he calls the economic theories of Alexander Hamilton and of I think the German economist Friedrich List. Excuse me. Both of them, you compare these two systems. Both of them are capitalist, but one is very much an empire of the sea model, and that, as the rise of finance becomes dominant, as the British Empire emerges, and as capitalism enters its imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, it's very much that British Empire of the sea. However, in Russia and in China, there is still a lot of admiration for the great dynasties of China, for Ivan the Terrible, because these leaders are seen with unifying vast territory. They're seen with bringing development. Now, these are pre-capitalist empires, both turgocracies and thalassocracies, empires of the sea and empires of the land. These are both pre-capitalist empires, but they had a very different economic relationship with the countries that came under their dominion. And the mode of production, the capitalist mode of production that gave birth to the monopolistic stage of that, which we now call imperialism, is very much taking aspects of thalassocracy, empire of the sea, and it takes that on. Whereas many people look at modern Russia and modern China, and despite the fact that these are not imperialist in the economic sense, right? They're not practicing imperialism the way Lenin described it. They are vast territories with different nationalities centralized by one state, and that they draw largely from the history of the turgocracies, or the land civilizations or land empires that existed. And, Stalin during World War II, he made a movie was very popular. It's still very popular. Sergei Eisenstein directed it. It's called Ivan the Terrible, and it's about this great czar who unified all the peoples of Russia and defeated the invaders. And that Stalin very much saw a continuity between what Ivan the Terrible was doing, what Catherine the Great had done, and what he had done, even though Stalin was doing it on a different mode of production, socialism, right? And so these things are kind of complicated. So when we say imperialism, we don't just mean empire. We mean the Leninist economic definition, and that there are different types of empires throughout the history of the world, and that thalassocracies, empires of the sea, and turgocracies, empires of the land, have a different character when it comes to development. Now, that's not to say that empires of the land aren't very, very brutal. The dynasties in China were very ruthless. I mean, they murdered a lot of people, right? And that, the Tsarist Empire, Lenin called it a prison house of nations. I mean, the Tsarist empires, were pretty brutal. So we don't want to make it sound like empires of the land are just all good. They're not, but they have to develop in order to increase the wealth that they get. They have to build roads, they have to build infrastructure, they have to be industrialists to some degree or other. And we saw that with Catherine the Great, etc. So this is an important thing when we talk about empire, right? We can't exactly trace it back to the Romans. I think the Romans are a great example of an empire of the sea. And the British Empire is a continuation of that. And the British Empire eventually gave birth to imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. And that Alfred Mahan, his book, The Role of Sea Power in History, which was considered, it's considered the first, published work of geopolitics. That book is very much about turgocracy and how if you control the sea, you control the world, because products are shipped by sea. And if you can control the ocean, you can control the world. If you read the novel Starship Troopers, which is a novel by the science fiction writer Robert Heinlein, if you read that novel, it is a very racist, fascistic novel that is kind of studying and indulging various aspects of the British Empire. You know, you know, it's basically the British Empire goes to space, and then every chapter, if I remember correctly, is like a little essay about how this aspect of the British Navy and the British sea-based empire is a good thing. And you read it, it's very demented, right? It's very supremacist. It's very, you know, it talks about the death penalty. It talks about all kinds of awful things, you know, and it's very racist, racially supremacist, etc. But you read it, and it's Robert Heinlein is very much a believer in the British Empire way of doing things. You know, and I've often talked about Jack the Ripper, right? No one had ever seen anything like Jack the Ripper before, right? You know, I mean, that had never happened anywhere in history, right? There had been brutal murders, there'd been torture, but Jack the Ripper, this is a man who hires prostitutes and then cuts them up into pieces and is sexually aroused by doing so. No one had ever seen that level of, you know, deranged behavior. It had just never happened before. And ultimately, right, you know, Jack the Ripper gives birth to the modern phenomenon, the modernist phenomenon, I guess you could say, called the serial killer, which doesn't happen very much anymore. But why did Jack the Ripper emerge, right? 1888, you know, you have this man in London who was probably a doctor, was probably a surgeon. He seemed to have some medical knowledge because the way he cut up these women was very precise, and he knew exactly where every organ was. And this man who was probably a surgeon, you know, starts hiring prostitutes and cutting them in all kinds of pieces. And, you know, and it's just very, very brutal. And no one had ever seen anything like that. So, you know, it was a very unique case. No one had ever seen anything like that kind of behavior. So then the Times of London, of course, is, you know, they want to catch this murderer who's murdering these women in these very brutal, horrific ways. They want to catch him. So all kinds of people start sending letters to the Times of London claiming to be Jack the Ripper, describing all kinds of, you know, very detailed, elaborate descriptions of how they carried out the murders. And of course, there's only one Jack the Ripper, but there's thousands and thousands of people that are basically getting off sexually by writing these deranged, you know, letters describing how they are the one who committed the murder and they did this. It showed that the mental illness that motivated Jack the Ripper to commit the crime, I mean, the fact that he was, you know, sexually perverted to the point that he would commit a brutal, horrendous form of murder like this, right, was quite widespread in Britain at that time in 1888. And why was that? Well, in Britain at that time, parents were being told not to hug their children, not to give their children affection, because the British Empire thought that affection would make children weak, right? You know, and that was one thing that was going on. And there was a culture of violence that was very much, I mean, they were trying to train a layer of people to be, you know, colonial slave masters, colonial enforcers, soldiers, conquerors, and the psychology of the Victorian era, right, where they're telling people to suppress their own sexual feelings. They have this huge public relations campaign telling people never to masturbate, you know, control your sexual behavior. At the same time, parents, don't hug your kids, don't give children affection, right, and then glorifying war and violence in every aspect of life. It gives birth to a really deranged form of sexual perversion. And you see this horrendous murder, the Whitechapel murders, and no one had ever seen that. But after Jack the Ripper did what he did, well, I guess I'll finish up. So the Jack the Ripper murders happen, and all these letters are being sent by, it's clearly thousands and thousands of people in Britain are like wannabe Jack the Rippers that are that deranged. They're aroused by murder. They're aroused by, you know, sexual violence. At that point, you know, the real Jack the Ripper, he wants to get credit for what he's doing. So he sends a body part, right, in a package, and it's a real body part from one of the women he murdered. It's evil. You know, it's very, very evil. You know, it's very, very evil. But we know that then, in starting like the 1890s and the 1900s, that kind of behavior started to become more and more widespread. And the rise of that kind of evil behavior, that kind of, I mean, people have murdered other people throughout history. People have been violent, people have been vengeful, people have been cruel, people have committed hate crimes. But this particular form of evil, right, where people where it's largely men are murdering women in order to get sexual pleasure out of it. That had not happened anywhere, and it was a big aspect of modernity. And really, I mean, the 1980s was the peak of it. In the 1980s, this happened all the time. Now it's slowed down in the past 2 decades. We don't see serial killers like we used to. It still happens occasionally, but not the way it once did. You know, now the serial killer is starting to become a thing of the past, and people wonder about why that is. People say that the accessibility of pornography may have something to do with that. That these men that want to do it, they just watch porn, and that's what some people argue, and that would debunk. A lot of people blamed pornography for what the killers did, and I think one of these serial killers, Ted Bundy, before he got the death penalty, he actually said that he blamed pornography for making him do it. Other people say that that nowadays, if somebody has these proclivities, if they're a young teenager, their family or others will pick up on it and medicate them, right? And that medications prevent this. Some people say that some of these men are struggling with erectile dysfunction. And that this is a lot of the men are dealing with the humiliation of erectile dysfunction. So now Viagra is out there. I don't know what it is, but for some reason our culture is no longer producing this particular type of murderous insanity and murderous perversion. But there is no way that you can deny that this type of murderous perversion is the result of the rise of imperialism. Victorian England, with its unique recipe of not giving affection to children and suppressing sexual desire, right, and making people very, very obsessive about trying to control their sexual feelings, inducing a lot of shame around sexual desire, combined with a culture that glorifies violence. All of that seems to have unleashed a form of perversion that is very, very misogynistic. Now, nowadays, we have mass shooters, and mass shooters are a completely different thing. Now, mass shooters didn't start to happen until the 90s. Mass shooters have kind of replaced serial killers, right? And it tends to be men who do mass shootings. There's no evidence that these mass shooters, it doesn't seem to be sexual in nature, what mass shooters do. It seems to be motivated by rage. It seems to be motivated by depression, et cetera. But it's not sexual in nature. I've heard some people try to argue that that mass shooters are sexual because they're ejaculating. They're ejaculating with bullets. I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. To some degree or other, violence and the unleashing of violence and rage and sex is linked in the mind, and we know that. But other than that, there's no real sexual nature to what mass shooters do that we can find, that we're aware of. It seems to mostly be these are sociopathic men. These are murderous and suicidal men. Some people have tried to link the medicines, the psych meds. They say that men that would normally be suicidal, they would just kill themselves. They take psych meds, and that makes them murderous. It gives them this like desire to go down in history. That's a theory that's been out there. I know Alex Jones and some of the others have put that out there, and I ultimately don't know. I'm not a psychologist, but I have pointed out, and I do point out that the link between Jack the Ripper and British colonialism is exact, right? And that, even as the Soviet Union was falling, as Western culture was going into the Soviet Union, they started to have serial killers there in the 1980s. They had never had that in Russia before. But then in the 1980s, as Western culture and imperialist culture is making inroads into the Soviet Union, suddenly they had serial killers in the Soviet Union. And I think that's, interesting. So there you go. That's just kind of a tangent I decided to go on. But there you go. Imperialism is a stage of capitalism. Empires throughout history have played different roles. So there you go. All right. And the final question. If you were to focus a specific political group in DC right now, which would it be and what slogan would you use against them? Well, Junior Plan, I would protest against NATO because NATO is having its 75th anniversary in Washington, D.C. on July 9th through 11th. The North Atlantic Terrorist Organization, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And I would say out of NATO, bring the troops home, rebuild America. Or I would say oppose war and empire, defend working families. I would oppose NATO. That is the organization to oppose. They're having their 75th anniversary gala at a time they're bringing us to the brink of World War III. This is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the terrorist organization. They destroyed Libya. They occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. NATO is a murderous criminal organization. And I would appeal to the American people that we should bring the troops home. We should have jobs and schools here in America. We should have programs that benefit working families right here instead of programs that kill working people in other countries. I would make a populist appeal against the Atlanticist organization, against NATO. That's what I would do. So I hope that answers your question, Junior. And folks, it looks like we did almost 2 hours tonight, so it wasn't that short. But I am going to end it here. I don't see any further questions. So I'm going to put on the closing music. I'm a little tired tonight. Thank you. Happy Victory Day to everyone in Russia, everyone around the world celebrating the victory over fascism. I'm going to put on the closing music. It's been fun. Thanks, everybody. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.